Good morning. This is just a little video to demonstrate writing some code online. I'm just going to make a little program that asks for input, and it's going to pretend to roll a die that many times, and it's going to print out what the result of the die roll was. And part of this is just to show you how to use this RexTester thing. This is an online compiler if you don't have Visual Studio. It's given me a little bit of problems, but and that's why I wanted to show you just a little demo of how to use this. So a lot of the little projects ask you to enter a number or something like that, and because this is online, it seems to be set up a little differently. If you click on this button right here that says Show Input, now you can type in what the program. This is a way of sending input to the program. So you kind of have to pre-enter your input. So let me just kind of change this around here. I'll say how many times would you like to roll? There we go. Question mark. Okay. And if I click the little button down here, how many times would you like to roll? Okay, cool. That worked. And now let's see if we can get some input into this thing. Can I zoom in a little bit? Yeah, I can do that. So let's read in from the console. So when you read in from the console, you're reading in as a string, and if you need to do something numeric with that input, you've got to convert it to an integer. You could either do that in one line or two lines. I'll break it up into one line and then just show you how you could, or I'll break it into two lines and then show you how you could do it in just one line. So let me make a string variable called input, and I'm going to say that equals console.read line. So we even get some auto completing there. That's pretty cool. And now let me just print out console.writeLine. This is actually pretty nice. You entered plus, and then I'll write out whatever the player typed in. So that's gonna input here is a string. It's not a number. It's a string variable, because when I declared that variable, I said it's a string. And now if I run this, now watch what happens. I've got to put in like the number 10 right there on the command line. If I run this, it'll say how many times would you like to roll? You entered 10. All right. Cool. So that's the little trick here. Is you've got to pre-enter your input. All right. And now let's convert that string input into a number, and I'm going to call that variable rolls. So this is going to be a number, an integer, like a whole number. So of that type of data, that type of variable is an int rolls equals, and now I've got to use the convert class to turn that string into a number. Convert.toInt32 input. So this convert.toInt32 function takes in a string, and it'll give you back a number. And if it's not a valid number, it'll crash. It'll give you an exception. Okay, so now let's make a random number generator. And the variable type for that is a random. There's a random class built into C# equals new random. So there's an object. Random is an object that generates random numbers. And we've made a variable of that type called rand. So this is the name, this is the type, right? And if I wanted to have two random number generators for some crazy reason, I could call them rand1 and rand2. They have to have different names. You can't have two variables with the same name, otherwise the compiler can't figure out which one you're talking about. So now let's make a new random number, and then let's say I want to repeat this operation however many times is stored in that variable. So let me write a for loop here, for. Unfortunately, there's no auto completion, so I'll have to longhand it out. A for loop has three parts. A part where you initialize a loop counter, counter variable to keep track of how many times you've been through the loop, and typically that's I. I stands for iteration, to kind of crawl through one at a time. To iterate, to repeat. Okay, so there we've created a loop counter variable called I, and we've initialized it to 0. And then the second part is the condition. How many times under what condition do we want to repeat this loop? And we want to repeat it as long as I is less than rolls. So if rolls is 6, this will repeat 6 times. If rolls is 20, this will repeat 20 times. And then the third part is where we add 1 to our loop counter, or we update our loop counter. Usually that's adding 1 to it. So what this says is create a variable called I, as long as I is less than roles, do this, and then add 1 to I. And when this condition is false, the loop is complete and we'll jump past it. So now let me write out a random number, right line, and then what do I want to write out? Let me write out a random number here. So rand dot, and how do you get the next random number? Well, there's a bunch of options. We either usually use this one or this one. Well, let's use that one. And it takes the minimum value and the maximum value. So let's say we want something between 1, and I have a feeling it's up to but not including the max value. Let me put in 7 and see what happens. I'm pretty sure that'll actually print out numbers 1 to 6. And now we should actually, you know what, here, I'll even print out in here, roll let me print out the loop counter here. And that way you'll see what the value of I was when this thing was repeating. So let's run it and see what it does. And let's pre-type in our input and type run. And you can see rolls. So now it repeated down here. Roll 0 was a 5. And you see actually we didn't get the number 7. We actually got numbers 1 through up to and not including 7. So there's our output down there on the console. This thing is actually pretty cool once you figure out this little trick of how to kind of pre-enter. You have to pre-type in your input, and that's kind of it. So let me just for the sake of illustration, let me redo this as a while loop. While loops are maybe a little cleaner. Well, actually, you know what? Here's all you have to do. Let's take our loop counter and let's just put it up there. We'll make an integer variable called I and set it to 0. And then as long as this condition is true, we don't have to do anything with that. And let's take this and put it down here. And then all we have to do is change the word for to while. So what does this do? It makes a variable called I, sets it to 0. As long as this condition is true, it will do that. And at the end of that, we are adding 1 to our loop counter. So eventually, I will become equal to rolls and stop looping. And what will there be any difference in the output here? No, not at all. So there's my input, run it, and there we go. So there's a little example of how you can use RexTester. This seems to be a little bit better than the first online compiler that I showed you guys. And if you are having any questions, please feel free to, please email me. I'll make new videos all the time. I'm happy to make them every day. And, a little demo a day or something, that's great. I'm happy to do it. We've got to really get the C# syntax under our belts because we're going to need this when we get to Unity. So there's an example of just, converting number types, using a loop, making some variables, and doing that all in the RexTester website, which allows us to enter input. So that was the one little trick with this thing was you have to go to the show input box and pre-type in your input. And after that, it seems to work fine and actually be a pretty cool little compiler. So so there we go. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions on that, just email me or contact me through Google Classroom. All right. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy, and this will all be over soon.